I really just teeing this up. My name is Mike Rempel. I'm the director of the Data Collaborator for Justice. Data Collaborator for Justice. We are a research and policy center based at John Jay College that focuses on three topics: mass incarceration, racial and ethnic minorities, and low-level enforcement, like misdemeanors, summonses, stop, question, reverse, low-level enforcement. This is going to be about two of those three buckets: incarceration and racial disparities, and it's going to be about data in the New York City jail population. We're going to primarily talk about a dashboard that will present data over time. We created this to fill a gap. The gap was that we didn't know in any given moment where the jail population was headed. And then we didn't know necessarily where the jail population had been in the past for some reasons that I think Richie will talk about in his presentation. So what we're going to do, order of events, is I'm going to turn it over to Ashley Santiago, who is a senior community organizer at Freedom Agenda, in a moment. Freedom Agenda is basically a hub for closed Rikers advocacy in the city, and she's going to describe what current to closed Rikers and why it's important to have data on the progress that's taking place. Then we're going to get into the tool, and Richie is going to talk about technical and practical challenges of using NYC open data to understand the jail population. And then despite those challenges, Riz is going to walk us through what we got. So I know we're going to have time for Q&A. So with that,
thank you, Mike.
Ashley, we're going to start.
I'll start now. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Santiago. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a Puerto Rican woman, Queens native. Queen get the money. Shout out to Queens. And a little bit of how I got into this work. My stepfather was incarcerated throughout my entire life. He's actually in Greenhaven right now. And fast forward, just like growing up in Elmhurst, New York, Ruzy, a lot of my friends were channeled in and out of Rikers. Like back in the day, you would know New York City processed 15 and 16-year-olds as adults. So they were in adult holding pens on Rikers, which really changed the trajectory of their lives, as I realized when I got older. And then fast forward, my nephew, who is only 9 years younger than me, my sister had him when she was 17, ended up on Rikers Island. And that's what really mobilized my advocacy, especially realizing that my nephew was autistic and also had disrupted mood dysregulation disorder that we weren't able to find out until much later in his life, because the community I grew up in didn't really have those resources, especially around mental health, for us to gain that traction. So I found Freedom Agenda, which has been my comrades and family for the last 4 years. And we're basically a grassroots member-led organization, which means all of our members and leaders are directly impacted. They've done time on and survived Rikers Island, but also New York City jails and prisons. But also we have a bit of an expanded term for directly impacted. We also include folks whose family has been incarcerated. You incarcerate a mother, you incarcerate a family. And so that has kind of started our work. So if you'll see here, since Rikers Island's inception, there have been groups organized around the closing of Rikers Island. A lot of you have even heard the judge who owned Rikers before it was sold to the city, Richard Riker, used the island to capture folks who freed themselves from the South and held them as ransom to send Black folks back, both freed and enslaved folks from the South, back into captivity through a group called the Kidnapping Group. And before even Rikers, the island was sold to the city, Rikers was built, the state commission pushed back on do not build a jail here. For one, the land is toxic. The land that Rikers sits on is decomposing trash. It is literally a landfill. So the current iteration of this movement to close Rikers is the only one that we're currently aware of here in our city. And that has been the only one that we're aware that has been led by particularly and solely survivors of Rikers Island and their family members. So for instance, we have, unfortunately, the largest group of mothers who have lost their sons on Rikers Island through things like, unfortunately, suicide or drug overdose or just literal medical neglect for simple things like meningitis. And again, we're a huge coalition of directly impacted folks, allies, nonprofit organizations, data collectives. So basically, we all came together in 2016 and said that Rikers Island should not exist. We are one of the only states who have a floating jail in the middle of nowhere where the horrors and the violence are kind of separated from us, even though it is happening right in our backyard. We are already at 35 deaths in this administration alone, and almost 60 deaths since 2021. Also, 600 deaths since 2005 and counting, because Rikers has been a space that can and has held over 21,000 people. So through this movement, we at the time organized around convincing the Speaker of City Council, who at that time was Melissa Mark Verrietto, to launch the Independent Commission on New York City's criminal legal system, and to like push the closure of Rikers. And through a lot of bird dogging and showing up in a lot of spaces, Bill de Blasio at the time, agreed to put a expiration date on this penal colony that we have sitting here in our backyards. And it became official. Rikers would close official in city policy in 2017. So the city council and the mayor approved the plans to close Rikers a couple years later, and that happened in 2019. Next slide, please. So if you see here, the organizing that led to Rikers Island having an expiration date, even though there's still a lot of work to do to implement this plan, came from directly impacted folks and like continued grassroots campaigns. So the campaign to close Rikers, again, is the Coalition of Survivors of Rikers. And right now we have over 200 coalition organizations that are still working on the plan to close Rikers. But for us, the plan to close Rikers doesn't mean just like physically closing the buildings that exist on the island, but we also feel that we need to defend the rights of those who are currently experiencing incarceration. Even if it's just one person, their basic human rights deserve to be met. And we also want to shrink the way that New York City has been able to incarcerate in our city historically, with Rikers Island being able to hold over 21,000 people, and then already existing borough-based facilities that we've always had in our communities. So mass incarceration has been like harming the same communities for the past 50 years. So the last slide that you guys saw was actually put together by directly impacted folks who studied trends on where, even though New York City is so large, what the population was being made up, not only in New York State prisons, but on Rikers. And they were all coming from the exact same 7 neighborhoods in New York City. So those are communities like Hunts Point and the Bronx, Brownsville and Brooklyn, the Lower East Side, communities that I'm sure folks who grew up in the city have heard of historically being bad, quote unquote, or dangerous. But when it comes down to it, it's just communities that have been historically underfunded and underserved. So, mass incarceration continues to be super harming to the same communities for the past 50 years. And as I mentioned, incarcerated folks have been doing their own research. So again, this is the 7 neighborhood study conducted by men actually in Greenhaven Correctional Facility in the 1980s. And they found, again, that about 75% of people in New York State prisons and on Rikers came from the same 7 neighborhoods here in New York City. Next slide, please. So again, thanks to like awesome folks that I get to work with every day and just like amazing advocates, there is a plan to close Rikers. And because of that organizing, there is an expiration date. So the plan to close Rikers, as I mentioned, was passed in 2019. And there are some components to it. And even the components don't represent all the work that still needs to be done to like manage how we incarcerate and all the punitive systems that we have in our city that feed our carceral system, not just from NYPD, but I'm talking about systems like family court, ACS, etc. So for example, we're working on legislation right now to force the Department of Corrections to share information with family members when people are injured or die in their custody. And we're also working on some legislation to strengthen their oversight body, the Board of Corrections, to have more oversight, to be in the jails more. For example, the Department of Corrections is like one of the shadiest agencies because they have this union that disguises themselves as a union, COBA, Correctional Officers Benevolent Association, but what they really are is a mass incarceration lobbying group, and they get to like really hide a bunch of just like the trauma and horrors that are existing on this island. For example, in 2021, we were able to foil from the previous administration how much we were spending in each borough to send folks to Rikers. And we were able to foil that information. Currently, Mayor Adams' administration does not even keep that information at all. So we couldn't even get those numbers from them. But thank God for this comptroller who does. Next slide, please. So where we are in kind of implementing this plan. So we're actually pushing the mayor to deliver, and this administration to deliver on the points of agreement that is outlined in the plan to close Rikers, which includes 380 more justice-involved supportive housing units, making additional investments in expanding supportive and transitional housing. Shout out to Fortune Society, mental health treatment teams, expanding diversion options like supervised release, ATIs, and 6A programs. So like, one thing that I just recently found out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the waiting time right now to get housing in Fortune is about like 600 days.
I wouldn't know, but that sounds accurate.
Yeah, so we need all of this. And the rest of this presentation will focus a lot on the current jail population. So I won't go into a bunch of detail there, but I will say the jail population has not been reduced in our city the way that the plan anticipated and the way our city can be reducing incarceration right now. Actually, through this administration, we've seen mental health incarceration go up 50%, and we've seen youth incarceration go up 80%. So much so that our mayor wanted to build an annex on Crossroads, which is a juvenile detention center in the Bronx. So but again, the reason all of this isn't happening is because Mayor Adams is a come mierda, excuse me. And the state executives are kind of too, they haven't followed through on the steps that we need to take to build up other forms of public safety and to protect due process right now for people who are currently arrested. Next slide, please. So, this is kind of like the jails and the boroughs that are being replaced. So as I mentioned, a lot of folks don't know. Well, I will ask you, does anyone in here know how many jails we've had in our city at one given time? Anyone? Guess? No? Well, we have 14 jails. So Rikers Island is not just one jail. It's in a penal colony, as I mentioned, 400 acres, 10 jails and a boat. And we also had 4 borough-based facilities. So if you've ever been arrested or sent to bookings, some of you may know the Tombs in Chinatown, Brooklyn houses in Queens, or Brooklyn houses in Brooklyn, Queens houses in Queens, and then actually the barge, which is a actual boat that we use to incarcerate people, was brought into the city in 1992. It was only supposed to be a temporary borough-based facility for the Bronx, but they ended up just keeping it because the city sold the land where they were going to build the jail to make like a private outlet. 14 jails total. So our plan is to close Rikers, close those 10 horrible jails, the boat, and the jails that already existed in our communities. And this is kind of where we are. As we know, there's so much work to do to get to abolition. We need to eradicate judiciaries, no tea, no shade, the district attorneys. We need to abolish, again, ACS, all these things that feed this horrible system. And until we abolish that, unfortunately, especially communities that are Black and brown, people are going to lose their liberty in a pretrial detention center from anywhere to a year and a half. 2, we have a member who spent 6 years on Rikers fighting his case before he even went upstate. And where people are going to spend time at the loss of their liberty, their rights and their dignities must be met in safe conditions. At the end of the day, will they be jails? Absolutely. But we don't have a death penalty in New York City, or New York State, but people are dying pre-trial before they've been convicted of anything. 80% of folks on Rikers right now have not been convicted of a thing. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a mock-up from the design in the Bronx.
There are many, good elements like more access to programming, much better access to medical care. But, we are still concerned about the changes the administration is making to the capacity of each jail. When this plan came about, we wanted these jails to only have the capacity of 3,300 people at any given time, which forces our city to look into alternatives. The folks who are sitting on Rikers right now are pre-trial are dealing with the intersectionalities of being on house. Right now, 50% of folks who are on Rikers are experiencing some kind of mental health concern. So it forces the city to actually look for those alternatives instead of warehousing people on an island. So, we want to make sure that the administration is not adding more capacities to these jails, which they wanted to add 154 beds to each jail and reducing the number of therapeutic beds that we plan to have in these jails, which is extremely harmful because, you think of jail, you don't realize there's a building on Rikers NYC. Those are wheelchair ridden people, severely sick, late stage cancer. They don't deserve to sit in a decomposing jail where literal feces and stuff is falling through the plumbing because the buildings and the land is just so decrepit. And then lastly, we're also advocating for some more outdoor space and better spaces for visitors. I don't know if anyone's been on a visit on Rikers. It's horrible. It's so dehumanizing. And it's just not a good time. Next slide, please. So, the mayor has not prioritized culture change, but that's also really important for us. We want to make sure that the way that the city jails are running is not going to end up just being mini Rikers Island, because that for us is an essential part of closing it for us. But the mayor continues not to make this a priority, but we're going to continue to advocate for these things along with many other groups. So the mayor, we've advocated for better location and design, and we know that this is important, but it's not sufficient. And also in 2019, we created a points of agreements on closing Rikers, including a commitment to continue convening a culture change workshopping group, which the mayor has been dragging his feet on and has not happened, even though each month or at each kind of what's the word I'm looking for? There's midpoints where we have to check in with him. He has not, and we continuously push for that. Also, the violence of abuse and power and impunity continues to happen at Rikers. And city legislation and charter changes can limit those abuses. For example, when the borough-based jails were first being created, they were building and designing space for solitary confinement. However, we passed a bill in 2023 with the Jails Action Coalition, shout out to them, and Halt Solitary, where solitary confinement is now illegal in New York City and at the state level. So these jails cannot have decontamination showers or these spaces that they will use any other name other than solitary confinement, but it will be solitary confinement. Next slide, please. Also, closing Rikers means spending less money on incarceration and specifically on the Department of Corrections. But the budget passed since closing Rikers have largely maintained the Department of Corrections headcount instead of shifting those resources to the kind of programs and services that will reduce incarceration. And we're advocating around this right now. We're in the budget season. So for a lot of folks, if you don't know, it costs over $500,000 just to house one person on Rikers for a year. 80% of that money is mainly going to personnel, paying people's 401ks, salaries, indefinite sick leave, and nothing is happening for the folks who are currently on Rikers. Actually, in 2022, I believe, or 2022, 2023, Mayor Adams had actually pushed to cut from DOC spending, but what he did cut was 1.7 million, and that actually came from awesome reentry services like Fortune, who are going onto the island and doing amazing programming. Next slide, please. So yeah, as we're working toward the closure of Rikers and a coalition of, with our coalition of decarceration advocates and also environmental justice. So, we came together and we wanted to make sure that this land that has been historically hurting Black and Brown communities for the last 400 years, when the closure happened, the land also benefited those communities as well. A lot of folks think when Rikers is closed, I've heard things in the community, Trump is going to build these multi-billion-dollar condos, they're going to expand LaGuardia Airport. All of this is not true. We also simultaneously passed a plan called the Renewable Rikers Act in 2021. And through this law, the 400 acres that make up Rikers right now are going to be designed for public use and sustainability purposes. So the city just released a study on how the land can be used. You can find that through the Department of Citywide Administrative Services for wastewater treatment and renewable energy. And actually, our fight right now is to get the city to move forward concretely with this plan, including meeting the transfer deadlines for any vacant lands and buildings that are currently existing on the island back to DCAS. And with that, I will pause. So yeah, if you want to, get involved, if you're directly impacted, you want to be a supporter, we need all hands on deck, especially, again, this mayor, you let him tell it, he will say that we want more cops. We want, the National Guard on the subway, which is like the furthest thing from the truth, in my opinion. But yeah, and you can also, if you want to take action right now, this is our budget to close Rikers, and it'll go straight to your city council member, and some folks on the the budget committee. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Richie Lin. I'm the data manager of Data Collaborative for Justice. So thank you for Ashley for all the history and the great future plan and all the terrible stories and all that. So I'm here for focusing more on the technical perspective in the entire development. So Data Collaborative for Justice has been working on closing records for like a long time. We provide insight to public. We publish reports and analysis to support this project. So this is our latest project to give us a live information about what is going on at Rikers Island. Of course, Liz, our lead developer, is gonna give us a live demonstration after my section. So it's a dashboard, right? So where does the data come from? So primarily we use the DOC data that's published on the Open Data Portal. Big shout out to Open Data Portal. We get so much information from this platform. And the data set we're using is daily inmate in custody. So it's a very interesting data set. It has an individual level on the inmate, but it has a major problem. We're going to talk about that later. So, and in addition to this dashboard and to make it as informative as possible, we also use NYPD arrest and complaint dataset, DOC admission and discharge dataset, and also use US Census and the ACS population estimates. So to build this project, first we analyze our problem, right? So, what kind of problem we're trying to solve, what is the challenge we're having. So the biggest problem is I see some nodding here, the daily inmate dataset is only providing the latest day of inmate. So it doesn't provide any like historical data and everything. So that's our first challenge. The data source is not historical and it's refreshed daily. If you don't save the information for today, it's gonna be gone tomorrow. And it's gonna give you the information and for tomorrow. And also it has a very limited variable. Based on our understanding of operation of DOC, they have a lot more information, but they are only publishing like a fraction of it. So that's the challenge we're having. Also, we did have some research partners, research organizations that built some of the tools to trying to provide those insight about the jail. But we found some of them didn't provide the necessary granularity, and a lot of them are no longer maintained for whatever reason. So, and the last one, the pre-existing tool do not make the data public accessible to public. So again, it's the daily inmate population data, especially on the historical part. So to solve those problems, so Liz, we build a small data warehouse to capture those data and store it and process it, and we're going to make it available to public. So that's the first point we're trying to solve the problem. And then we also transform and analyze the data to give the public all the information they deserve to know about the jail. And also we build an interactive dashboard visualization and tells the stories and like what the public needs to know about the DOC, the Rikers Island. And also we are working, well, it's almost there. We're still working on making the data accessible to public with very easy method. So this is our technical ecosystem, or like the entire development strategy. So we script the data from or not scripting, we use the API to download the data from the open data portal. Our entire technical infrastructure is on AWS, is cloud-based. So we use a Lambda function to download and aggregate and transform the data daily. And we save them, we use a S3 data storage to build a data warehouse. So the whole dashboard is built in Python with a package called Streamlit. We're very happy to see a lot of other panels we see today also use the Streamlit as a visualization tool. Very powerful if you're interested. And also the entire dashboard is hosted on the EC2 focused environment. So, during the entire development process, we as a small and capable team, and have to learn a lot of the technology to make this happen. So, for example, the EC2, which hosts the dashboard that connects to the S3 data warehouse to provide the latest information, and also we need to balance the internet traffic and build like the user volume distribution with the CloudFront and Elastic load balancer. And eventually, because we going through like so many iterations of this development, we're trying to make this tool as best as we can. So we actually implement a CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous development model to directly connect our deployment instance to our code base. So every time the code upload and the dashboard just automatically update. So yeah, I would say I'm very proud of this work, and I'm very proud of Liz and Mike and the entire team at Data Collaborative for Justice to provide this kind of information to the public, as a lot of government agencies should have already done. So I'm gonna leave the stage to Liz to give us a live demonstration of what we have built.
Thank you so much, Richie. Like clip this here. I do have to say that what you guys are gonna see next could not have happened without Richie. This entire ecosystem is something that I'd never have done before a year ago. And without Richie's help and willingness to kind of learn this on the fly, it never would have happened. And so, yeah, every time I can praise Richie, I do. So, okay, without further ado, here we go. So, this is the New York City Jail Population Tracker, which is available at the URL in the URL space above. It's a little long, but you can also Google this. If you Google New York City Jail Population Tracker, DCJ, or Data Collaborative, you will find it. It is also on our website in various places under like publications and whatnot. The first thing that you're gonna see when you land in this tool is the homepage. And all of the things on this homepage are to give the user context around the history of Rikers Island, the closed Rikers campaign, and basically all the beautiful stuff that Ashley said. So I'm not gonna go into detail specifically about this page, but now I'm feeling like we need to like embed Ashley's talk like in here somewhere, because I think that's what we're missing. But I'll quickly scroll through this just so you guys can kind of like orient yourself. The whole idea here was to really make this like a standalone website. sometimes I find dashboards kind of lack context. And I think that this project needs context. And it needs that background. It's really important to the people of New York City, and it has impacted so many people that, yeah, the context cannot be skipped. And thanks to Mike, me and Mike went back and forth so many times going over the text and the narrative all throughout this dashboard. So I do highly recommend that you take the time, if you are interested, to check out the links that are in this homepage. They are very useful and full of great information. Before I continue, the first thing that we also wanted to make sure was on the homepage was this first header down here. If you did not have time to go into further detail into the further tabs that you'll see in this top navigation bar, I wanted to make sure that the homepage was a place that you could check in to see what is the current state of the jail population housed on Rikers Island and the other various jails scattered throughout New York City. So this big blue header here talks a little bit about the current jail population as of the latest data available on the New York City data portal. So today is March 29th. Like Richie said, usually the most up-to-date data is about like a day behind. So March 28th is the latest data point that we have. The other things that you will find on this dashboard are the average 30-day statistics. So not just what happened yesterday, but what happened in the last 30 days or a month. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about this next portion, but we also provide a one-year projection of what will happen in the absence of policy reforms. So if the status quo is continued to be accepted, what may happen to the jail population? And we also provide this here in this header. So if you don't have time, you can't dig into the tabs, we provide it here. You continue to scroll down, we give context behind why Rikers Island is closing, the problem, the solution, and the current state. We also don't want to leave our audience feeling sad or lost and that there's no solution, because there are clear solutions. And people like Mike and Ashley and the Lippman Commission that we haven't really talked about have given the administration clear solutions to lower the jail population. And so we do not want people to come to this dashboard and think that this is a lost cause, because it is not. There are clear, evidence-backed solutions to lowering the jail population, and these are just some of the ones that we highlight. And lastly, there's an interactive timeline that is coded in JavaScript that I just got off the internet that outlines some of the major events that led up to the decision to close Rikers Island, in addition to some of the key milestones that we have to hit in order to hit the legally mandated deadline of August 2027, and kind of where we are in the planning stage of the 4 borough-based jails. So yeah, please check it out. There's a lot of great content on the homepage. Where I usually go to next, especially if you're not intimately familiar with the jail population historically and currently, is the recent population trends tab. I know it's really it's like I always want to go to the future projections tab first, especially because it's first, but don't. If you don't have context, don't. Go to the recent population trends tab. This will help ground you. And the first thing that you're going to see here is a 30-day summary statistic. So you kind of just get an understanding for what is currently happening and what is happening in the last 30 days. But like Richie said, the data from the New York City Open Data Portal refreshes every day. And it's such a pain in the butt. We only started collecting our data about like a year and a half ago at this point, which is crazy, time flies. But we were kind of out of luck. We never would have been able to create a tool like this from day one, because we would have had 2 data points. Thanks to a bunch of other organizations we got connected with, they not only helped us understand AWS and the beast that tool is, but they even gave us bulk downloads of the historical data that they were scraping from the Open Data Portal. First, I think we got connected with one research organization and we got data just before the COVID-19 pandemic or something like that, not too long ago, but at this point, like that is really long ago, like 5 years of daily data. And then we had, this was like a tool that existed. We had convened a group of researchers to show them our product, to get opinions. And someone in the group was like, actually, there's a database that has this data going all the way back to June 2nd, 2016. And I had already created an entire projection model for our data. And we were like about to launch this, and we had to go back to the drawing board because we just had like 10 extra years worth of data. And it was great. God bless Charles Lehman for giving us that data, but it should not be that hard. It should not be that hard. This data should be accessible, and we should be working with other agencies like DOC, like Open Data, to think about the challenges that the agencies are facing in New York to make this data transparent and accessible. That being said, it's here now, but there's still work to do. So the first thing that you'll see is 30-day summary statistics. So currently, as of yesterday, there were 7,078 people incarcerated in New York City jails. In the last 30 days, there were 6,987 people incarcerated in New York City jails. So that basically means on any given day in the last 30 days, it was just a little bit less than what it currently was yesterday. If we compare that, and sorry, this gets a little cut off depending on your window width here, but basically this is population changed compared to prior 30-day period. We are 256 more people in custody this month compared to last month. That is not good. We are deviating from where we need to be in order to close Rikers Island. And if we look at this month compared to 1 year ago, we see an increase of 671 people. That is terrifying. And we'll go into detail about why we might be seeing a scary trend there. There are specific reasons outside of the overall trend that we're seeing historically speaking. The next thing that you will see is the historical rolling 30-day average chart on top of policy and world events. So users can actually change the view of this chart depending on whatever time period they're interested in. And you can even save this as a PNG file if you're trying to create a report. There's also a hover aspect, so you can see what the start and, sorry, I'm like shaking, the start and end date is for the rolling 30-day period, the total population, and the difference from this month compared to the last month. So our first data point that we began collecting was June 2nd, 2016. And you can see that we were on a steady decline all the way from 2016 to about the COVID-19 pandemic. That is for a reason. New York City was investing in diversion and alternatives to incarceration, and we were making a concerted effort to decarcerate. Obviously, a lot of things have happened. Some of these policy events here that I will call out, if you can't see in the back, are raise the age implementation, bail reform implementation, and then the red line is the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic, you see a massive drop in the people who are in custody, mainly because there was a health concern. So the Department of Corrections discharged a large amount of people. Government officials and people in the criminal justice system say that there was a spike in crime rates after the pandemic, but also a lot of courts shut down. And that caused case processing times to drastically increase, which caused people to stay in custody for much longer. And so you see this increase of the people in custody after the COVID-19 pandemic to increase as well, mainly because of that. This bluish purple line is the signing of the Less is More Act, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then this purple line is the beginning of the Adams administration. So everything to the left of that is de Blasio, and to the right is the Adams administration. So clearly we can see after the COVID-19 pandemic, we have absolutely changed the trajectory of the jail population. And we are deviating from where we need to be in order to close Rikers Island and hit that, what are we at now, 4,200 capacity that needs to happen to safely close those islands and transition to the borough-based jail facilities by 2027. Additionally, we wanted to not only just look at the high-level population, but we wanted to break it down further into population status. Now, technically, this is a variable that the Data Collaborative created, but it is based off of a variable in the open data called inmate status code. And this identifies subgroups in the larger population, like the people who are detained pre-trial, so people who are not yet convicted of a crime and are awaiting trial, people who are in custody due to parole violations, people who are actually convicted of a crime and they are serving a jail sentence, people who were also convicted of a crime and are waiting to be transferred to an upstate prison facility, and then everyone else is an additional group, so that's orange. So like Ashley said, the vast majority of people who are in custody on Rikers Island are awaiting trial. They are not yet found guilty of a crime. They have not been convicted of anything. In the last 30 days, that is 82% of the general population on Rikers Island. Normally it is about 85 to 84%, so it's a little bit higher. We created this toggle function to actually get rid of the pretrial detention population because it's such a large percent of the overall population. It kind of skews our y-axis. And we wanted to allow the users to kind of drill down into these smaller subgroups. For this use case specifically, actually, is anybody aware of the like unsanctioned strike that's happening in upstate prisons right now? Okay, some nods, some no. Okay, so there's a strike that's happening, a corrections officer strike that's happening in upstate, and it's actually having impacts in the jail facilities on Rikers Island. So Kathy Hochul, our governor, basically is saying that, I guess maybe it's not her, Mike would know more, so don't quote me on this, but basically people who are awaiting state prison, so this purple subgroup, are staying on Rikers Island. They cannot be transferred to the prisons in upstate New York because a lot of firings have been happening. There's a lot of logistical things that need to be figured out in the prisons upstate. And so we're seeing a spike in the population for people with the state prison sentence awaiting transfer population status, which is causing the pretrial detention percent of the total population to decrease for the last 30 days. And if you zoom in here and kind of scroll over, you can kind of see that happening. So between January 28th and February 26th, people awaiting transfer to upstate prisons only accounted for 1.7% of the general population on Rikers, which is about 113 people. However, in the last 30 days, we saw this drastic increase due to those upstate prison strikes, and now there are 306 people awaiting transfer. Some of the tools that existed didn't have this population status broken out like this, or it wasn't historical. And so we couldn't track that change and how it was actually impacting our general population above historically. And so now we can actually say, okay, this is concerning, this increase is concerning, but we now know the reason. And hopefully short-lived. These people will be transferred to upstate and no longer will be in the custody of the Department of Corrections of New York City, but will be transferred to the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision of New York State soon. Additionally, since all of the things that you've seen have been aggregated to the 30-day rolling average, I wanted to make sure that users were able to see daily trends as well. So this month-to-month comparison tool, sorry, it doesn't all fit on the same screen, allows users to compare the daily trends across any given month in our data set. So you can compare any month of any year that we have to one another to see the trends over time. I got this inspiration. If anyone has Rocket Money, they have this at the top of their app. And I thought it was really interesting, so I put it in the app. And then, like Richie said, one of my biggest goals and like kind of pet peeves was that there were other organizations collecting this data, but weren't making it accessible to the general public. And so at the bottom, my goal was to make the like aggregate daily population tables available, not just for the overall population, but broken out by all of the variables that we have. Unfortunately, since Richie and I are not front-end developers, there's a bug that's happening that if you click the download button, it doesn't download. So we're working on it. We have a couple of fixes in mind, and we are going to push an update as soon as possible. If you are interested in accessing this data, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to get that to you. Yes, if you go on Safari or Firefox, you can download it. It's just a Chrome problem. Yes. Yeah, we're working on it. Anyway, so I also want to talk about racial and gender disparities. As Mike said, this is a big part of the Data Collaborative for Justice. And this is really important, too, to talk to this crowd about because of the data limitations of the open data set. The daily inmates in custody, I'll also say it would be lovely to rename that data set. I don't love the name of that data set. Maybe we could say like daily incarcerated people, daily people in custody of the Department of Corrections. Just something.
Inmates illegal now, but
yeah, we can maybe rename it. Yeah, we could add that to the list of things that we want to bring up. Anyway, in addition to that, there are very limited number of variables included in the open data source compared to the private data that the Department of Corrections actually has. And we know this because we have at one point worked with DOC at the Data Collaborative and gotten access to their private data. And the information that we would like to have access to is things like ethnicity and what borough the person was convicted in. It's information that does not risk identifying the individual in custody. And this would be great because the open data only includes things like race, which reports white, Black or African American, Asian, American Indian or Alaska Native, and other. It does not include or report the Hispanic or Latino community. Because we have used the private data, we do know that the vast majority of people who are indicated as other may fall into the Hispanic or Latino community. However, I did not feel comfortable relabeling the data as such, so we have continued to label it as other, with the caveat that the vast majority may be a person of color, especially a Black or brown person of color. It would be great for the open data team and DOC to work together to get ethnicity data included in this open data so that we actually know what's happening with our Hispanic community that are currently incarcerated. Additionally, there's, I believe they call it sex. 5 minutes, really? Okay. I think we have 15.
Some Q&A.
Okay. I think they call it sex, but we relabeled it as gender. There's confusion about how sex or gender is reported, whether it's a self-identifying variable or whether the corrections officer is assuming. DOC classifies people as female or male. And so we are using the gender terminology moving forward. And then in addition, they also include variables indicating mental health designation. So we call that BRAD-H. And so that signifies if someone has been or received a mental health treatment while in custody. And so in the last 30 days, the majority of people in New York City jails are non-white, are men, and are people who have received mental health services. So I'm not going to go into crazy detail about these tabs, just given the time, but basically you can see the breakdown of people in custody for the last 30 days by the various racial categories reported in the New York City Open Data Portal. And we also supply a historical trends graph. Some might say this is not very interesting, but I think it is, because it tells us that over the past nearly, 10 years? Nothing has changed. Black and brown people have been the vast majority of the people in custody of the Department of Corrections. Where we incorporate the US Census and the ACS population numbers is to compute incarceration rates. So we look at the general population by race, not ethnicity, to basically create the incarceration rates. Here you can see it in the table to the right, and then in graphic form to the left. And then in addition, we calculate a racial disparity, which is basically just a rate ratio. So it's the incarceration rate of one group over the incarceration rate of the other. So the largest racial disparity that is happening here is among Black and Asian individuals. So Black individuals are actually incarcerated nearly 16 times higher than Asian individuals in New York City. When we look at Black and white people, so basically the racial group that's in the numerator of our racial disparity is going to be on the y-axis. So that's how you would look at this graph. And the racial group that's in the denominator is on the x-axis. So if you want to compare Black people compared to white people, you would navigate to the Black label here, and then you would navigate to the white label on the x-axis. So then you see that Black people are incarcerated nearly 11 times higher than white people in New York City. And these statistics will update every 30 days, I believe. I'm gonna have to double check that. I think this is every 30 days, not every day. We do a similar calculation for gender disparities as well. There is a rising concern regarding the number of women who are incarcerated on Rikers Island, especially because the borough-based jail plan puts all of the women who are going to be in custody in one facility in Queens. And the capacity for that, I believe, around 400 to 500.
450.
Yeah. And so you can see that the, let's look at the percent of total. So we wanted to give people the option to toggle between looking at men and women, but also looking at it as a raw number. So just the overall number of people in custody, but also the percent of the total population. So you can kind of take a look at whichever metric and whichever class that you're interested in. And what's really nice about working with Streamlit in particular is that you can not just create these graphs, but you can create narratives along with your graphs and input metrics that change dynamically with your data. So I always look at this change over time bullet when I walk through this dashboard, because I think that it's really interesting, where you see that the number of men and the number of women in the New York City jails has decreased pretty proportionally so from our first data collection in June 2016 to current day. So they're both down about 29 to 30%. However, if you look at just the past year, you see the increase in women is 6% more than the increase in men. And that is concerning, especially because the capacity of the jail facilities for women is pretty limited. And one thing that we're looking to do, we're going to do like a version 2 release of this dashboard, is to combine the gender-related aspects with our mental health service indicators, because a lot of the women that are in custody also have mental health needs. And so that's something that we would like to bring to light as well. And then additionally, we look at incarceration rates by gender. Men are incarcerated at much higher rates than women. The general population is about 50-50 men and women, but the jail population is not. And Lastly, for the disparities, like Ashley said, more than 1 in 2 people in the jail on Rikers Island have a mental health designation. So they have received mental health services. According to the Criminal Health Services, CHS, Correctional Health Services, more than 20% of those people have severe mental health needs. That is not included in the open data set. This is just a binary flag of whether or not they've been treated for a mental health service while in custody. Okay, the last thing, and I know I want to leave time for questions, is the future projections tab. So there's like a huge asterisk on this tab that I always preface. This is not for operational purposes, for capacity planning of the borough-based jail systems. This is to get the message across that if the status quo is accepted, if there are no policy interventions, and if nothing changes, where will we be in a year? We use a very simple statistical model called an ARIMA model, which is an auto-regressive integrated moving average with exogenous variables to predict the average daily jail population for the next 12 30-day periods. So basically, in short, our model is based off of the trends in the average daily jail population itself, on top of data from the New York Police Department, which includes arrest counts, and crime counts. This is the result. So you have the historical average daily jail population in blue on top of our 12 predicted points with an 80 and 95% confidence interval. We also tried to provide a projection performance section, which basically takes a look at what we projected 6 months ago, what was the data collected since then, and what are we currently projecting. So here you can see, because of those strikes that are happening upstate, we see this drastic increase in the actual data that we collected. Our model did not anticipate that because we didn't want it to. That was not the purpose of the model. But because our model updates with new data every single day, we were able to account for that. And now our projection is projecting higher than what it did 6 months ago. And then lastly, we also included the projections for the exogenous variables, so the outside variables that are included in the model, which are the various crime and arrest counts, and the data tables. And I'm gonna stop there because I promised Q&A and we only have 5 minutes. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
So in my role with the Portrait Society, I'm involved in teaching people, giving people access to digital devices and digital skills. I was perusing your tool on my phone as you were going, and I noticed that the mobile version of the site is
not as good.
It needs some work. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. And I heard you say earlier that you were not front-end developers, and I totally understand that. I think that what you have done in terms of the visualization has been really excellent. But coming from the population that is affected by the statistics that you're talking about, that is part of the statistics, that population tends to only have access to digital resources through their phones. And so I was wondering if you had any plans to make the mobile version more accessible so that that population can use it in their own advocacy. I mean, for my purposes, I would love to use your data. Actually, would be wonderful for our teaching people about data. I think it would be an excellent resource. But I just was curious about those plans.
That's an awesome point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It has been on our radar that the mobile is less than ideal. Streamlit, the package that we used, is supposed to be adaptive for all platforms. However, because I wanted to be fancy, if you went to the MTA talk, they really did just use the Streamlit features. I really wanted to personalize this and make it look like a website. So I used a lot of HTML and CSS and made it look like a website. And it's a lot of those features that are making the mobile look less than good. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we should consider because that is something that I did not think about. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
The keyword for an intern, if you'd like to look for one, would be React Native.
Okay, love, thanks. I love this conference.
To do that front work.
Okay, cool. Yes.
Does either of you know who among the mayoral candidates support the
It's a you guys question.
project?
Yeah, right now we're super lucky. Besides like Dream, Don't Rank Eric or Eric Adams or Cuomo. We have some really dope champions. So like we have Jessica Ramos right now who's like championing treatment not jail legislation, who would open up more diversion courts. Zoran Hamdani, who's awesome. He's a democratic socialist, wants to see Rikers closed. We also caught Zelnor Myrie the other day on WBI in the morning and flat out asked him what he thought about closing Rikers. He supports it. So far, everyone seems like really on board. But just remembering Mayor Adams campaigned his whole time, like, I'm the only mayor who wants to see Rikers closed.
Right.
So definitely got to keep our foot on their necks once they're in office as well.
Yes. Yeah, you have the mic. Do it.
So it's similar to the question at the back. Do you know at the moment who's using your website, how they're using it? Is it media, individuals, politicians? How does it get used?
Yeah. I think Mike has a really good example about the Littman Commission report.
Only that it got used. So I don't think it's a very good example.
I think it is. I don't know. I read the report. I was happy.
Oh, well, for people who don't know, there's a commission. It's called the Littman Commission. It's named after Jonathan Littman, the state's former chief judge. It's existed since 2016, and initially in April of 2017, released an initial report that many people believed was kind of the final straw in convincing Mayor de Blasio to support closing Rikers. Then Mayor de Blasio's plan, when actually described, is largely based on that 2017 Littman report. So anyway, they just released another report, and they used the dashboard. I guess that's the example. I mean, I think honestly, the answer to your question is no. It's only been online for what?
Like 6 to 8 months? 4 months, really? Oh.
4 months. We would love to know how it's being used and by whom. And I think the answer is, overall, we kind of know people within the criminal justice community are aware of it and are probably checking it, but that's about as far as it goes. So we'd like to have a better answer to your question.
Yeah. We're at time. All right, guys. If you have more questions, we'll stick around outside. Feel free to ask us anything. Sorry, no, it's fine.